A taste of legendary Radiomir classic for a fraction of the price. Did Steeldive manage to pull it off, and how good is the final product, and will this watch scratch that Panerai itch? Well, the answer is it's complicated. Hello and welcome to the channel. A quick disclaimer, this video is sponsored by me. I did buy this watch with my own money and nobody is paying me for this review. This Steeldive is of course a homage to an iconic Panerai Radiomir California dial, originally designed and produced for Italian Navy in 1936, so I guess it is not a coincidence that Steeldive designated a model number 1936 to their homage. As the story goes, when Panerai was tasked with designing dive watches for Italian Navy, Panerai had to seek some outside help, and because company was more of a navigation equipment manufacturer rather than a watch manufacturer, they had to turn for assistance to none other than Rolex. Rolex did help to source the movement and also influenced a somewhat unusual hour indices on the dial, half Roman, half Arabic. Why this type of dial ended up being called California is a bit of a mystery, and probably because it gives this watch a bit of an exotic flair, the name stuck till this day. As a matter of fact, Panerai engraves the word California on the rehaut of some modern Radiomir models. So how did Steeldive do in their attempt to pay tribute to Radiomir? Well, they did a pretty good job in my opinion, especially taking into account that this Steeldive can be purchased at the time of making this video for about $135 and possibly even cheaper if you buy it on sale, which on AliExpress is almost every other week. They did this with some deviations, which I'm mostly happy with, and I will cover them as we examine this watch in more detail. Looking at the packaging, we get a tried and tested Steeldive plastic, robust and cushioned box, of course the watch and a warranty card. No useless fluff here, just as I like it for the watches in this price range. Dimensions. Just in case you are not familiar with Panerai watches, they are anything but small, and it is by design, so to speak. For example, modern Radiomir models are mostly 47 and 45 mm in diameter. Such a large size might not be to everyone's taste, and here Steeldive made a good design decision in my opinion and went with somewhat smaller 42 mm case size for this particular homage, which definitely makes this watch more versatile. With its 49 mm lock-to-lock distance and with a nicely sculptured cushion case, which is 13.9 mm high, I really like how this watch wears on my about 7-inch wrist. Such a compact dimensions make this watch also wearable on a slimmer wrists, and I will put some footage of this watch on a 6¼ inch wrist and on mine about 7-inch wrist later in this video. Continuing a prominent and bold theme of this watch, we have 24 mm wired style lugs with attached leather strap. The leather strap tapers down to about 22 mm by the buckle, and on a supply strap this watch weighs 97 grams, and it will cover at about 8¼ inch wrist, which is equivalent of about 21 cm in circumference. Dial. Sticking to a California dial theme and luminous sandwich design, Steeldive did do one or two things differently here, and I will come to them in a moment. So yes, Steeldive did use a so-called luminous sandwich design, where the luminous layer, which by the way has a good amount of C3 superluminova applied, is covered with the dial upper layer. I like the dark green gradient color of the dial, which in different light can look anything from light green to a very dark green or nearly black. I also like the sort of sandy texture on the dial. It is somewhat unusual and works well in contrast with overall polished stainless steel case of this watch. We have pencil, minute and hour hands, which are also filled with lume, and we also have a second hand which is painted dark blue, and unlike the minute and the hour hands, which are very legible, the second hand is almost invisible on the green background of the dial. Taking into account that classic Radiomir watches don't don't feature a center second hand at all, I think this is a clever design solution from Steeldive, still giving us the practicality of the second hand and at the same time not breaking the overall aesthetics of the dial. In terms of branding and other writing on the dial, Steeldive took a minimalistic approach here, which again does not break the aesthetics of the classic California look. Crystal. We have a gently curved, what appears to be a double-domed sapphire crystal here, which sits ever so slightly proud of a mirror-polished fixed bezel. And sapphire being very scratch-resistant will help to protect that polished bezel from scratches. According to Steeldive specifications, there is a double layer of anti-reflective coating applied to the crystal, possibly because of the color of the dial. The blue tint of the air coating is not very obvious, however, I didn't have any issues with the legibility of this watch. Moving on to the case, we have an all-around mirror-polished cushion case with a wide lux. The case finishing is very good, pushing considerably above the price point of this watch. The side onion-shaped screw-down crown is also very well done. It is very easy to handle, the threading is very smooth, at least on the watch I have here in the studio. At the back of the case we have a polished screw-on case back with engraved Steeldive logo and some specifications. With screw-on back case and screw-down crown, Steeldive declares 200 meters of water resistance, which definitely makes this a very practical watch. I guess the leather strap might not be the best choice of material for swimming, so this is something to keep in mind. Movement. Steeldive went with a tried and tested Seiko Instruments NH35 automatic self-winding movement here, which I think is a very good choice in this particular case. This movement hacks, it can be hand-wind and has a power reserve of about 42 hours. Just on a side note, I did see some variations of this style of watch from other brands with a mechanical movement, which might look nice, especially with the exhibition casebacks. However, if the movement is not automatic, it will most likely have around 38 hours of power reserve and will require a daily wind, which means screwing and unscrewing the crown on the daily basis, which might wear the crown thread pretty quickly. I know that Panerai uses non-automatic mechanical movement in some of their watches, however, these movements have up to 8 days of power reserves and therefore do not need a daily wind. So, in my opinion, Steeldive going with the automatic movement in this particular watch I think is a very good design decision. Bracelet. I like the supplied leather strap on this watch. It was a bit stiff when I got the watch, however, it did break in fairly quickly. It has some padding closer to the lugs, which makes it somewhat more comfortable, and generally it feels and looks okay. We have prominent brushed stainless steel buckle. I would prefer to be signed, however, not a deal breaker for me. I did get some water on this leather strap, and the good news that it wasn't damaged, or it didn't get damaged at all. Basically, the water just dried out without leaving any traces. However, I didn't swim in this watch, so I don't know if this leather strap will stand a prolonged exposure to water. The good news is, of course, this strap can be replaced if you so desire. Just a small note here, however, these are wired style lugs, that is, they are made of 2 halves which secured by a tiny screw inside the case. I did find these tiny screws somewhat fiddly to undo, so a correct size screwdriver will be needed to change the strap, otherwise you risk damaging the screws. There are spare ones sold on AliExpress just in case you need them. So you're still here, and I guess you're possibly curious if this Steeldive did scratch that Panerai itch I was talking about at the start of the video. Well, for about $135 we get a pretty good quality homage to a legendary Radiomir. Very good finishing on the case, good comfortable size, reliable automatic mechanical movement, decent lume and a good practicality with 200 meters of water resistance. However, beware, you actually might like it, and that is a dangerous territory because you see, you might actually want to buy a real one. And if you want to buy a Panerai, it is actually not that out of reach as it used to be a few years ago. The prices for Panerai watches did come down quite considerably. They are on the recovery now, but nowhere near as they used to be a few years ago. And also, Unlike Rolex, for example, you can actually buy Panerai if you so desire, and I found myself searching the internet for good second-hand and new Panerai watches, and at the moment there seem to be quite a few around. So, if you wish to get a taste of such a style watch, then go ahead and get it, but be careful what you wish for.